Hi and welcome back. As of the time I'm filming this, it is currently December 11th at 11:30 p.m. Yes, I'm supposed to be either A, working on a final project that's due tomorrow, or packing to go home tomorrow. But I'm nothing if not a procrastinator. So I decided to wind down and relax a little by filming a quick video for the end of the semester. In my defense, I went to the library for like 8.5 hours today, so I'm a little tired, okay? So, first off, I don't have this book on me right now. I brought it back home. The first book I read this semester was The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Um, this book relies upon three rules, which is it's the law of the few, the stickiness factor, and the power of context. So if you are somebody that's interested in going into marketing, I would definitely recommend this book because those three principles kind of are the basis of all of his research, and they definitely apply in terms of like if you're interested in making advertisements or making things stick. I will say a lot of the case studies are very dated because I believe this book was written about 20 years ago. So it's kind of talks about social media and as like a new concept, and so a lot of it is not quite relevant anymore, but I think a lot of the core principles are still the same. So if you're a marketing student, I would definitely recommend it. It definitely helped me in some of my classes this semester, so that was really great. To be fair though, I am also very biased because Malcolm Gladwell is my favorite author and I've read all of his other books, so take that with a grain of salt. If you are interested in getting to Malcolm Gladwell though, I would recommend reading Blink first. That was my personal favorite, and I think that has the most, I don't know. I just find it very personally interesting. I would say though that if you are easing into the Gladwell style of writing and research, you also might want to start with Outliers because that's the famous one, 10,000 hours theory and whatnot, but it is still a good book, so I would recommend that. Overall, I would give The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell a 7 out of 10. Okay, so this next book I actually do have on me because I use it as a decoration now, but this is Accidentally Wes Anderson. I'm not quite sure who wrote it, but I think it's the team that's behind the Instagram account. So a lot of people went into making this, and you can tell it is an absolutely great and beautiful product here. So it technically is a coffee table book, but I wanted to read it because I'm such a Wes Anderson nerd. Like, this is very up my alley, so I did actually want to read it. I think it's a very fun novel kind of read. I would suggest approaching it from the perspective of a travel bucket list because that's more so what it is as opposed to a narrative based story. It goes by each continent and it breaks down all of the submissions and gives a quick history behind the locations, behind the photographs. If you were really into photography, I would definitely recommend checking out this book. It is absolutely gorgeous, some of the scenes in this book. I definitely love it. I would not recommend it if you were somebody that's not personally into reading coffee table books and just like to use them as decoration. That's fair, I understand. But if you are into his filmography and if you are into photography, I would say that it's a fun read to get. Just like some of this is just so gorgeous. Like, I'm trying to find a good example. Like, where were some of my favorites? Oh yeah, like here's just like a bathhouse. Like, look, this is just on a little train history there. I think that's in Seattle, I believe. I'm trying to find this one castle in here. It was a castle on the lake. It's gonna take me forever to go through this book because it's freaking humongous, but... And so overall, I would rate this book an 8 out of 10. I would also like to take a quick intermission to show what my setup looks like right now. I'm very aware of how crazy my room. You can see my laundry back there and some posters I haven't hung up back there. Yeah, I'm supposed to be packing, but that's neither here nor there. On my desk here, I have some citrus mint tea to help me relax from final season. And I have this jelly cat that my friend got me. His name is Duncan because he's a little coffee cup. And he normally sits on top of my book stack. So he's like my little reading buddy. But yeah. So the next book I read this semester was Hope for Cynics. This was technically for a class, but I got to pick out of a list of books that I wanted, and this title really intrigued me, judging a book by its cover, but I absolutely loved this book. This was probably my favorite read of the semester so far. He starts out the book by giving tests to see if you're a cynic or not, which was very eye-opening because I always thought that I was an optimist, but it turns out I had a lot of cynical tendencies, and it kind of shows you how to turn from a cynic to what he calls a hopeful skeptic, which means that you still maintain a lot of the optimistic qualities, but you are still allowed to critique the world around you because critiquing the world is what improves it in a way, just in a less pessimistic sense, more of in a growth mindset. I really like it because he wraps it all at the end when talking about climate change and activism. I thought it was really interesting because it's not often that I read a book that has such a strong call to action, but it talks about, like, it gave a lot of good examples of how people were fueled by their cynicism, which was actually hopeful skepticism, and how they were able to make an impact in their communities. So yeah, all that to say, I think this is a great example of using case studies correctly because he is really good at making the people in this book seem real to you, even if you don't personally know them. You get to know their story. And it all just connects back to this greater theme, and it feels a lot more personalized. He talks through this lens through the perspective of a late colleague of his. This colleague had such an optimistic mindset that the author was like, how could somebody possibly have a mindset like this? It's almost overwhelmingly positive. It must be fake. But we get to learn, I believe his name was Emil. You learn Emil's story and how that he was able to build such a strong, optimistic mindset. And so through each chapter of the book, we check back in on his story and his upbringing and his family, and it really ties the whole thing together. So I definitely enjoyed that. So this is definitely an example of like a research-based book that has a narrative storyline. Yeah, so like I said, definitely my favorite book of the semester so far. I think it was definitely eye-opening in a good way. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. So the next book I also don't have with me, but this was definitely a switch up for me. If you couldn't tell, I am not really a huge fan of fiction. I am more of a nonfiction fan myself, but I was convinced to read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was, again, definitely different for me. I have not read fiction probably since like around high school. Like, I'm acting like that's like forever ago, but it's not really my thing anymore. It hasn't been since probably like around like my Percy Jackson days, my Hunger Games era. Yeah, but I thought this was very enjoyable. I thought it was an example of a well-crafted story. I was not the biggest fan of Monique's perspective. I mean, to be fair though, it is hard to switch back and forth between Monique and Evelyn Hugo because Evelyn is so grand and like this larger than life character that by default Monique's parts do feel a little bit flat. So I'm not sure what my critique is for that. I feel like those parts could have been fleshed out a bit more, but I would say definitely stick through the first couple paragraphs until the switch to Evelyn, because that's really when the story begins to pick up speed. I did enjoy the writing style. I thought Evelyn was a very well-crafted, well-rounded character. I don't know if anti-hero is the right word for it, but it's like you want to root for her, but you also kind of hate her, which is also how Monique feels when you're reading this. The only other thing, I did feel like the ending was a bit predictable. No spoilers here, but I feel like I had an idea of what was going on about like halfway through the book, but that's not to say that this isn't a good story. I think it's well worth it because each husband individually surprised me in the ways they played back into her life. It was just the big twist at the end wasn't really doing it for me. I would overall recommend this book. I think it was very fun. I don't know if it's being adapted into a movie soon, but I feel like it probably should be, and it probably will be eventually because this would read really, really well on screen. So overall, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I'm gonna have another little intermission to show off my pajamas. They are Snoopy Halloween pajamas that my mom got me. They're so comfy. So I'm so comfy and cozy right now. This is great. You know, I'm supposed to be working. Okay. The next book I read this semester was The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. I'm not quite sure how to feel about this one. I am not a fan whatsoever. I feel like I read a review for this book, which I think sums up how I feel, that this book is kind of like a novelty for those who do not feel creative themselves and analyze creativity as a concept as opposed to a way of being, like it's trying to say. Because it's directed towards artists, but a lot of the concepts in it were very, I don't know how to say this, very plainly laid out and not, they don't really go into depth. It's very obvious statements, I would say. Like some of the concepts were like, what if you think outside the box? Or like, what if you try writing with your left hand for once? I don't know, maybe that'll make you more creative. I don't think it was as deep as it could have been. There were some interesting concepts in there. I really liked the chapter about competition and how it can be used to fuel you in a healthy way instead of letting it deteriorate you. Also, each chapter is about 3 pages long and then has like an interlude in between of just a quote. This is definitely a stylistic choice, and I'm sure people like this because it makes it for a nice, quick, easy read. I'm just not personally a huge fan of it. But overall, I think this is just a great example of telling and not showing. It tells you a lot about creative techniques, but doesn't really tell you how to utilize them in your own life. He speaks very vaguely, and I'm sure this is for people's privacy, but he'll be like, oh yeah, there's this like really, really famous musician I worked with once. I can't tell you who it is, but you definitely know them. They were having struggle recording something, so I told them to sleep on it and it worked. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is the one that really got me. This entire page only says, sometimes disengaging is the best way to engage. Like, I feel bad because I'm sure this advice would be helpful in a certain place and time, but again, I think this is more so for people that are interested in creativity as opposed to actually doing something creative for themselves. Like, a lot of these concepts is, again, just a lot of telling, not showing. I don't know if I would recommend this, but I would give it a 2 out of 10. So those are all the books I've completed this semester. I am currently reading Cudi by Kid Cudi. It's his personal memoir, and I am about a third of the way into it. I'm still in the childhood section of it because he does it in chronological order. Or well, he starts, his introduction details a very personal moment in his adult life that kind of inspired him to turn his life around, and then we immediately cut back to his early childhood. So interesting introduction, I will definitely say. But most of what I've read so far has been talking about his family, like his parents and his siblings and their relationship, and how whether or not he still has those relationships to this day. And he also talks a lot about his musical influences, and this was my personal favorite part so far. I really look up to him as an artist. I think he is insanely talented. So to hear about like who inspired him when he was younger has been really cool to read about. I would definitely recommend this book if you are the type of person that prefers an informal, conversational, but personal style of writing, because it reads like a conversation. He's writing as he's speaking it is kind of the vibe that it's giving. I did see that you should listen to the audiobook version hypothetically instead though, because he voices it himself, which is really cool and also very impressive. But since it reads in a very conversational tone, I heard that it's very interesting to hear him actually say it because it feels like he's speaking to you, and that a lot of the emotions are a lot more raw and real because it's his voice saying it. So after I finish reading it, I might give some sections of the audiobook a try just out of curiosity. He has a nice voice, what can I say? Yeah, I don't have a rating for it yet. I will say I am enjoying it so far, and I will definitely follow up later. So yeah, that's everything I have been reading this semester. I hope that this has been some help. If you are also somebody that's interested in nonfiction, even though I was a little all over the board this part of the year, yeah, I really enjoyed most of them. I enjoyed reading all of these, and I highly recommend them. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions or any recommendations. Thank you for watching.